that's submitted through Turnitin, and also there might be take-home exams. Historically, Western Sydney University has delivered on large scale on-campus invigilated exams. But in 2020, Western Sydney University, like many other institutions, had to rapidly adapt and change practices. And so through unprecedented challenges come some opportunities as well. So in 6 weeks, Western Sydney University rapidly and fundamentally changed the assessment experience of our students. We developed and deployed 333 invigilated assessments. There were 240 alternative assessments, and you can see there how many students undertook those. But what we did was quite remarkable, and we did it in the most remarkable way as well. We brought new teams together from across the institution to build, deploy and support invigilated assessments at scale. Our Learning Futures Online Assessments Task Force, it had representation from Learning Futures, from IT, from the library, Student Experience Office, exams, quality and review, and we got together and we built exams or online assessments that were invigilated. Now, what's quite remarkable is that 49% of the people you see in that Zoom capture there had never used Blackboard before. So we had quite a remarkable sort of effort to do there, considering we had very tight time frames as well. But 6 weeks later, we surveyed our task force colleagues, and 93% of them had said it had been a really satisfying experience. They had learned a lot, they'd met some new colleagues, and they had some new skills as well. And 93% of the task force members reported at the end that they had increased their Blackboard skills so much that they considered themselves as either an advanced user or an expert user of Blackboard. So we now have this wealth of extra capacity in our institution, which is really great. For the exam period, we put together a hypercare support team. This had members of the task force, plus more of our IT colleagues from the service desk. And we put this team together so that during the exam period, we could provide really rapid responses to students who had any technical issues during that. Now, you can see here from the graph that the team were really busy. The majority of the issues that students had were really in the demo exam that we set up so that they could check their technology, check their equipment, their environment in which they were going to do the exams. So they were the biggest kind of challenges that the team faced and students had experiences with. But not all assessments are created the same. So some schools had a uniformed approach to their online assessment, but other schools had some challenges that were driven by disciplinary differences and accreditation requirements as well. For example, in business, there were questions that had a multiple choice response or a short answer or an essay, and these can be easily accommodated in the learning management system and with a proctoring platform. However, in that same school, there are accounting, economics, sort of finance, statistics kinds of units that are not as easily accommodated through the native tool set in Blackboard. But then there are also discipline differences that come from engineering and maths, where there's handwritten responses, and these can't be effectively delivered online under invigilated conditions. So we had lots of layers of complexity here. And we had the School of Science that took an approach of, for all their finals, to do all of them as alternative assessments. So there isn't a one-size-fits-all when you're talking about online assessments at scale. So we've got disciplinary differences, we've got accreditation requirements, and also the units itself. So if units are already fully online or they're very heavily and have a mature level of flipped delivery, then they're going to have different assessments embedded in those as well. So after the exam period, we surveyed students and wanted to know about their experience. 77% of the students were very satisfied with their online exam experience. 80% of students felt that they had the correct technology and the equipment in order to do their online assessment. What's worth noting here is if students didn't have that, there was a student assistance fund to help them. Students also reported that they found it was easy to access their online exam. And so that's really important when we're talking about reducing some of the anxieties for students in transitioning to an online assessment. If I draw your attention to the 64% of satisfaction with the proctored exam experience, it's worth noting that there are disciplinary differences and unit delivery modes that contribute to this as well. So in Q1, when we also ran online invigilated assessments, we had a satisfaction rating of 80% with our medicine students. But see, they were already quite familiar with doing online assessments. And in that same quarter, our business students, they had over 70% satisfaction, and they were also used to, in some degree, doing online assessments. So for the majority of our students who had not done this before, they had decent levels of student satisfaction with their online experience. We also surveyed academic staff as well. And we wanted to know about their experience and their reflections and what worked well for them, what some of the challenges that they had. And academics were were highly engaged in the transformation to online and alternative assessments. We had lots of very robust discussions around online invigilated assessments and how these would be developed and how these would be deployed. And the logistics of all of that. And again, disciplinary differences add some layers of complexity. There's been an increase in the capacity in terms of designing online assessments and alternative assessments through our efforts in autumn session. And I reflect on this and think with such remarkable achievements in a short period of time, we're talking 6 weeks, imagine the possibilities that come from having successful experiences in alternative assessments when you actually couple that with institutional infrastructure, support and processes that are also pivoting in that same direction. So you may be interested to know the metrics, how did students go with our efforts? Well, they did okay. Our improvement rates at undergraduate and postgraduate levels were increased from 2019 to 2020. We have collected the student feedback on unit survey data, and we're going through a full analysis of that. There's a lot that still needs to be unpacked, but certainly there is an explicit agreement that satisfaction has remained stable or improved, and some schools have actually seen an increase from 2019 to 2020. And in our survey of academic staff, we asked them about alternative assessments and academic integrity issues. And staff were of the view that it was generally more efficient to run alternative assessments, and there were no greater academic integrity issues than invigilated assessments if they were designed correctly. So our outcomes and our next steps. We have increased our capabilities in our academic and our professional staff, both in terms of in learning futures and in other portfolio areas across the institution. We have examples of really good practice that we can leverage into alternative models for assessment. And we have new processes and infrastructures in place to support a continued shift towards alternative assessments at scale. And probably my favourite is around the new partnerships and the new relationships that we've developed across the institution, both in our academic colleagues and with other department areas that we don't normally sort of engage with so deeply and so intensely like we did for the exam, the online assessment work, but also with our students. So we have an alternative assessment working party that involves students. We're very keen to learn from our experiences from the different lens and the different perspectives that we're all involved. But I think we're in a really good position to leverage that for our future efforts. So thank you.
Thank you, Lene. That's great and very good timing. So we'll just wait until James gets ready. I'll just ask anyone who's got a question for Lene to please put it in the chat. I think that will be good, and we'll follow up with that as we get towards the end of the webinars series.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is James Valentine. I'm a lecturer here at Charles Darwin University. I'm the coordinator for the Bioscience unit in the Tertiary Enabling Program. Our enabling program has majority of students online, so 80–85% of my students are external. And as of this year, across first semester and second semester, I've had over 1,000 students enrolling in the unit. So the assessment design in bioscience is very much catered towards the external student studying online. That's how we've designed it. So I've thrown together a few slides to show you how all the pieces link together, just to make it clearer, because it gets a bit complicated. But I think, like everyone, we start off with our learning and teaching materials. So we have readings and various associated activities. These activities are things like discussion board posts, videos, there are writing activities, revision quizzes, and these are all non-assessed activities. So they're designed to help the students understand the learning and teaching materials, but also give them a bit of a taste for the types of things they're going to be doing in their assessment tasks. Now, we also have practical tasks in our unit, and the pracs are designed to tie together the different pieces of content covered in the learning and teaching materials, but also to give students some practice for the assessment tasks. So they're directly doing the types of things in the pracs that they are going to be assessed on later. We provide answer sheets for the pracs, and students are encouraged to self-assess how they went with them. The students do have to submit their pracs with their assignments, but we don't mark the pracs. What we mark them on really is just that they have done them. So our learning and teaching materials tie then directly into our assessment tasks. So we have various quizzes that the students do. The quizzes are based on learning materials and the pracs. The student should be completing those to do well in the quizzes and the pracs. And we give students 2 attempts at each quiz, and we only count the higher mark they get towards their final grade in the unit. Each of the learning and teaching materials, the practicals, tie into 3 short assessment tasks. They're predominantly written, but students also have to communicate using tables and graphs in their assignments. And the feedback they get in these assignments allows them to improve from one assignment to the next. So the feedback they get in assignment 1 helps them to improve for assignment 2, and so on for assignment 3. And in these assignments, we're preparing them for the major assignment in the unit. So there's a direct flow on from there to their major assignment, which takes the form of a scientific report. So we don't have a formal final exam in the bioscience unit that I coordinate. Everything works up towards this major assignment. So this structure allows us to progressively develop students' knowledge and skills across the semester, starting with our learning and teaching materials, low risk, low stakes, the same with the pracs, moving into the assignments, getting into some, getting a bit of high risk, higher stakes tasks, and then again to the major assignment, the high risk, high stakes task at the end of the semester. Now, I guess the final layer to this in supporting students is we have a policy of allowing resubmission of failed assessment tasks. So anyone who fails one of the assignments is automatically given an opportunity to resubmit. For students who do fail, we give them feedback on where they've gone wrong, what learning materials they need to review in preparation for their resubmission, and we also insist on having a conversation with them about their assignment too. And the point of the conversation is to encourage the students to reflect on why they think they failed, and also to make sure they understand the feedback so they can be successful on their resubmitted assignment. We know from a little bit of work that I've been looking at over the last 12 months that students who fail that first assignment, it's really critical for them to go through that resubmission process, because those who don't resubmit that first assignment, 90% of them go on to fail or drop out, whereas the majority of them who do resubmit go on to be successful and pass the unit. So that's kind of it's identified that first assignment as a critical point for us during the semester. Looking at sort of some of the literature on enabling education, I haven't been able to really find much, if anything, on resubmission policies or practices. But what we do see as well is as the semester progresses, more students take advantage of this opportunity. So they are, I guess as students are becoming more invested in the unit and they're more interested in going on to complete, they see that as an opportunity to help them achieve the success that they are seeking. So yeah, I think that wraps things up from me. So hopefully that gives everyone a bit of a good idea about how in my unit I support students to achieve success through the assessment design.
Yeah.
Thanks, James. That's great.
Yeah, I was just going to remind you, while you were speaking, some questions were coming in that were directed to you. So if you could just have a quick look at it while we continue with the presentations.
Of course.
Okay, so I think what we're going to do now is just, as I say, we've got some more questions for Lene, some more questions for James. Please put them in the chat. We'll get to that in a minute. But we're now going to just examine those two presentations really through the lens of our students. So I'm going to go to our students, and I think I'll start with Leanne first. Sorry. And my question for all of you, as you think about it, is reflecting on those two presentations. What one thing stood out for you as supporting student success, I guess, is my question. So Leanne, do you want to start off with that question?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Simon. And thanks, James and Lene, for those presentations. So I think the one thing that really stood out to me was the timely feedback on the assessments and that opportunity for resubmit of the failed assessments. Like you said, James, it was really important, I think, for student confidence that they can get that feedback and be able to resubmit and, like you said, continue on rather than potentially pulling out of a unit. You know, that to me is really, really important, because getting the feedback and understanding that, you know, you may have actually made a simple mistake or just not understood something from the get-go rather than, yeah, throwing away a whole semester worth of work. So, yeah.
Thanks, Leanne. That's great. I'll go to Roz. I can't see her, but she's disappeared. Oh, there she is. Hi, Roz. You're going to have to turn your microphone on. That's it. You see, we've been like that.
Okay, there we go. I totally agree with Leanne. And one of the things that I found was when as a student you were supported, especially when it's such a length of time since you've been in the learning environment as a student, and how things have changed, that needs to be put across. And as a teacher, learning to know your students and how they learn so you can best clarify to make them to go forward, and doing all of that in the beginning prior to the assessment has to be good, as the feedback comes back from where you fail or go further or so on.
Thanks, Roz. And finally, Janice, what's your answer to that?
Hi everyone. I'm a fresh graduate Master of Global Media Communication, and unfortunately or fortunately, during my 2-year study at Uni Melbourne, I haven't experienced any like typical or traditional exams. Most of my units are accessed by research essays, so I need to submit 2 research essays, one in the middle of the semester and the other at the end of it, and the total sub-words would be 5,000 words. And I think it's pretty much connected to what Lene has shared. Like, for example, like a media and comm student like me, I won't simply be judged by my performance through like typical exams. Other way, I'm adjustably replaced by using multiple types of assessment, for example, the essays and the verbal presentation. And we also have some group projects. For example, we need to make an audio-visual project through the whole semester, or we will coming up with a multimedia project. So my think on this topic is that it really depends on different departments, and I'm sure there's non-students who should be assessed by only the traditional written exams. Thank you.
Thanks, Janice. That sounds that sounds very authentic. The kind of assessments that you're undergoing there. That's great.
Yeah. Thanks very much for sharing that, guys. I do have some more questions. First of all, if I could put this question to Rosalind first, do you think the various types of assessments you have done reflects what is done in the real world?
Some of them, yes, I do. And that is dependent on the lecturer and how closely connected their experience has been with the real world. If they are recent, from like I'm doing Bachelor of Education primary, and if their recent classroom experience has been within a shorter period, yes, definitely they are. But when there is a lecturer that it has been a distinct period of time since they've been actually in the classroom, I've found that as I've gone in to do my pracs, it hasn't been relative to me, what they're telling me.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for that. What about you, Janice? In your own experience, do you think the assessments that you have done reflects what happens in the real world?
Yeah, I agree with the previous speaker. Some of them are really fit into the real life. For example, the oral presentation and the project ones. I will apply this both technological skills and soft skills and bring it into my industrial experience later on, for sure. But however, like most of my assessment are written research essay, and I think they are quite a bit disconnected from the real world, since I'm not allowed to have my own opinion or do my own research, for example, reach to the practitioners in the industrial. Instead, I will just make up all of my research essay from the library resources. So it's a bit disconnected, I would say. Thank you.
Sure. Yep, thanks.
I think I got the next question, haven't I?
Yes,
so
you have, Simon.
There you go. I'm following the script. So mine's to Leanne. So Leanne, do you feel there's enough choice in the assessment designs you currently see to evaluate kind of the diversity of the student learning? So, you know, thinking 21st century here, social media, etc., and also the very different disciplinary kind of needs that we naturally have nowadays. So, you know, is it a kind of, do you see a one size fits all, or is it a lot of diversity of assessment that you're currently seeing?
Yeah, look, essentially, no, I don't think there's enough choice. And a lot of that comes down to, so I am a business student and essentially a finance student. And really for me, it's been really hard to replace that pen and paper scenario. So really, you know, I'm a bit more visual. I am obviously a mature age student, so I really rely on pen and paper to be able to write things down and try and think my way through when I'm answering a question. And so moving on to fully online exams, invigilated exams, has made that very difficult. It's a different way of learning and expressing yourself. And the way I would put it as an analogy is it's like, you know, when I did my unit and I learnt my stuff, it was like I was learning to drive and park a smart car, and then I turn up to do my driving exam and they give me an 8-seater Tarago. So essentially all the parts are still there, but how I use it is a little bit different. Will I get through? I'll probably get through. Will I touch the curb? Probably. So it's just, you know, everything is there, but at the end of the day, it knocks your confidence a little bit and just makes it a little bit harder to get the same results.
Thank you. That might have needed translating for the international audience, but we'll go.
No, that was pretty good, actually. It's very, very interesting metaphors. I like it.
Yes.
Thank you for that. I'd like to ask this question. Well, first of all, to Tak. Tak joined us a little bit late. So would you be able to share one assessment experience that was the most memorable for you during your studies, good or bad? Oh, Tak seems to have disappeared. Oh, he is. You need to unmute yourself, Tak. There we go.
I'm Pranit. So my favorite assessment for this semester has particularly been the alternative assessment that I have done for my 300 level digital marketing subject. So I am currently in my final year of the Bachelor of Commerce, and that has enabled me to illustrate and demonstrate my knowledge about the subject in a written format when compared to multiple choice questions. And it has also allowed me to achieve the high distinction mark, which I was aiming for as well. And the flexibility of the assessment has reduced the amount of stress that I normally go through an assessment. I had a 1 week to go through the assessment and submit it as well. So I guess that was my favorite assessment for this session.
Very good. Thank you for that. What about you, Janice? Would you be able to share one of your favorite assessment experiences?
Sure. So there's one unit I took called New Media Harnessing Digital Disruption. It sounds really like theoretical, but it ended up not at all. It's conducted a mixed type of assessment. For the first one, we need to submit a research essay to discuss this issue. But at the end of the semester, we're going to submit a multimedia project, and we are forming a group to do some interviews, to get involved with the Elwood community, with some environmental campaigners and groups, organizations. And as an international student like me, it's a really rare and precious experience to really get involved and expand my experience into the local community. And at the end, I got like 91% of the grade since the lecturer really likes our project. So that's a really good experience for me.
That's very good, actually. And it's also interesting to know that our group project was one of your favorite projects, which is probably unusual to a certain extent. So thank you for that. Can I move that question to Roz, please? Would you be able to share one of your favorite assessment experiences? Go to unmute yourself, sorry.
Okay, sorry. Not just one, but when I have had a really good experience as far as assessments are concerned is when they've been relative. Something that a child and adolescent development, you think, well, wow, how boring is this going to be? But when the lecturer made it relative and we did stuff about bullying and online, and it was tough emotionally to do that assessment, but it was really rewarding at the same time. I got a lot out of it. So any of the time this stuff has been relative to me in the course and what I'm trying to learn is what has made it a valuable experience.
Very good. Simon, yours.
My questions is to Roz as well, so I'll go with that. So one of the criticisms I think students have about assessments is they do not know what to kind of expect or what's going to be evaluated, and therefore they're quite unsure about their expected kind of performance level. So how can that kind of be addressed? How can that be improved?
I think right from the get-go, from the beginning, you need to, if you're going to assess by rubric, you need to be clear to the students, this is what is expected, specifically X, Y, and Z. This is what we're going to be teaching to, and make sure that it is clear and they do understand. That needs to be also, if there is a rubric, it needs to be given to the students that they can use it and work towards. And also that for you as a teacher will give you the ability to be reflective of your own practice, that, yeah, you are getting through to your students and they have got what you want them to get out of the lessons.
Yeah, so it goes back, I think, to that thing of having lots of formative chances of having a go before you get assessed summatively, really, you know, very much about building your assessment literacy up. Thanks, Roz.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for that. If I could pose the next question to Leanne, do you think your performances in assessments has helped you to do better or worse in other assessments, not necessarily in the same subject, it could be other subject at different years, but also outside of studies, even work areas?
Thanks, Praneet. So absolutely, I find that with every assessment, I take something away. Even if I've done really well, I don't then sit there and go, oh, well, I've got that. I don't have to think about it ever again. I'll always try and reflect on every single assessment I've done and think, you know, what did I get out of that? What did I do well? What didn't I do well? If I got some things wrong that I didn't expect to get wrong, I'll always try and understand why. And often it's the basic things, you know, you just didn't read the question correctly, or I remember once writing a whole essay that I thought was amazing, but there was one question in that essay I just never answered. I got so involved in the research and got excited about the topic, I forgot to answer the question. So just things like that, I definitely have it as a continual learning and improvement process, definitely.
Excellent. Okay, Simon.
Yeah, I think I'll go to Leanne and I'll go to Janice. I guess this is coming back to that authenticity bit and the real world experience of assessment. So what are your experiences with assessed group work? Everyone always says, you know, group work, employers says it's really important. So what are your experiences of that? And how can it be designed better? And I guess the slight complexity there, I'm talking about assessed group work as opposed to group work assessment. So it's not the output that you produce from the group, is actually the group work that occurs. So there's a subtle kind of difference. Everyone says that's really important. We need graduates who can work in groups and build teams, etc. Sorry, that's to Leanne.
Okay, I was going to say, who did you want to go first?
Sorry, that's okay.
That's okay. It's a really interesting one, Simon, because I think whenever you ask any student about group work, they roll their eyes and go, oh, I can't stand group work. However, when you do it in the workplace, you're kind of a bit happier because you're getting paid for it. So that's the biggest difference. But look, for me, I would really love for the students to actually be involved in designing the group work from the get-go. I think to actually say to the students, look, we would like to see a group activity. How would you like to see that happen? And whether, you know, we designed it and broke it up ourselves, even before working on it, I think would make a huge difference.
That's a good idea. Janice, what about you? What's your thoughts on group work or assessed group work?
Yeah, well, I think adding on Leanne's thought, yes, everyone will have a deep sigh when hearing, oh, we're going to be assessed by group work. There might be some criticism about uneven workload, or, for example, uneven workload but getting the same result at the end of a semester, which is sad, of course. So my suggestions would take the real experience I got from one of my audiovisual communication subject. we have to come up with a group project at the end of the semester, which is really big one, like 20 minutes of video in the end. I think what the subject coordinator did great is he asked us to do peer evaluate, like of course anonymously, like secretly. You won't blame your teammate publicly. He did take that sincerely. For example, you can give kudos to yourself for sure, and you can also secretly tell your subject coordinator who's doing less. So I think that's one main suggestion I would give to subject designers. Like, you should actually mark individual like separately according to peer review and self-evaluation, and of course from your own observation. And the second suggestions I would say is, though it's a group work, and I'm sure every group works differently, the subject designer can actually tell clearly and cut work different tasks into separately into details, and even the workload a bit. Thank you.
Thanks, Janice. That's great. Okay, so looking at the time, we're pretty bang on, I would say. We're not doing badly.
We're doing really well for time, and I think there's been a lot of questions coming in from the chat, and it is good to see that a number of presenters have been addressing them. Thank you very much for that. But if anybody else has any particular questions that you'd like to ask anybody on the panel, you can just type it in the chat and we will try and address it using our microphones.
So I thought what we could do maybe, as those are coming in, we could ask our student panel if they've got any questions for us. Let's turn the books. We've asked them a lot of questions.
That's a very good idea. Why not? Yes.
Yeah, you see, there you go. Push that boat. Okay, let's see if they've got any questions for us, and then we'll go in the chat and see what else we need to have answered.
Yep. So people on this student panel, Leanne, Rose, Janice, and Tak, do you have any questions for us?
I think I would just, I don't know, like, it's how long is a piece of string, right? Because we're talking about our assessments and they're different for everybody and all that sort of thing. But, you know, I'd love to just see a little bit more work done on things like even not having a final exam worth 50%. I think that's really off-putting for some students who've worked really hard and they've got like nice solid 70s leading into their final exam. And for whatever reason, something happens that just really knocks that. And it can be quite a knock to the confidence to know that everything actually rests on that one final exam. So something like that would be amazing.
Well, Leanne, I'll answer that question the way I always answer my question. I did finals because I came from the UK. So I did 3 years of study, and everything, my whole entire degree rested on 5 examinations all at the very end. So if you think things are bad now, you got to imagine what that was like. So that was challenging. Lene, do you want to answer Leanne's question about some of the stuff that we've actually tried to and do, that rebalancing away from 50% exams and etc.?
Look, absolutely. And so we're looking at a lot of the data from autumn semester to really see what students are like about them, what their student experience is like. And we're getting a lot of rich qualitative data as well. And we're also talking with academics. We are wanting to move more towards alternative assessments, and even those assessments that are spread across the teaching period, not necessarily right at the end, because I think that's really important as well. Because if you think about, you made that point, doing all of that work and then 13 weeks later, then you get assessed on that. All sorts of things could happen in that period of time. So having all the data from this experience, even though it's been an enormous amount of sort of energy and effort to do this, it's given us some insights that we've not had before. And we're going to be using those to make some real changes.
Thank you. Any other questions from our student panelists for us?
Rose, Janice, Tak, or even just comments that you'd like to share with us?
I've got something there, and that's assessments. Yeah, it's great to talk about them and your final stuff, but at the end of the day, you want your students to be the best that they can be at whatever it is that they're undertaking. So they do need to be assessed quite vigorously. I would think that, and particularly as the rest of the country has found out about externally learning so much and how much that impacts on the students, I often feel that external students aren't supported nearly as much as what the students in the classroom are when you go and you sit in at the lectures and you get the experience from the other students, the one-on-one and the talking about the currency of the stuff, that whatever it is, whether it be how to do fractions, how to teach this or whatever, is how teachers can support this in an external learning environment to benefit the students.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Ross.
Does Janice and Tech have anything to add at this stage?
Yes, I would. Actually, I did come up with a question related to the COVID online teaching style. From my knowledge, some of my friends studying in the business school, from the past term, they experienced a kind of really weird and combined online group project. And, you know, it's really hard. It's hard to communicate in physically, and it's even harder during like Zoom chat or something else. And I'm just wondering if anyone has any thought about this to turn over the group assessment online, or what would your suggestion about this task? Thank you.
Mm. I'm looking at you, Frank. Sorry.
Sorry, I was just typing.
Online group assessment, I think, was Janice's question. I mean, look, we've done a lot of stuff with, I'm going to say peer-wise. What was it? No, it's not peer-wise. What's it called? My brain has gone slightly mushy. But anyway, there is a tool, which will come to me fairly soon, where you can do an awful lot of that kind of self-evaluation. So you can evaluate it as an individual, and then you can do your calibration with different kind of markers, so you can get a perspective of everyone's kind of contribution to the assessment task. I think what I'll give you my example of group work, because I like to use this one, because people get very confused about group work. So imagine your task is to bake a cake, and you've got 5 of you in the kitchen, and one of you is outside smoking, the other one's having a chat, and only really one person is doing the work, and you create this beautiful cake at the end of the day, and it gets a high distinction kind of mark. That's what generally gets assessed in kind of group work. So one person or 2 people do all the work, and there are others don't tend to contribute. You're not really assessing group work there, you're assessing the output of it. Now imagine the same case where you've got all these people, the students working away, one's cleaning, one's cutting, one's running around, everyone's been communicating and supporting, you make this beautiful cake and then you drop it on the floor. Okay, in theory, when that gets assessed, it only gets a pass, maybe even a fail, but the group work's been excellent. So are you assessing the output, or you're assessing the group work? And this is always the challenge in this group work assessment. When you move that to online, it becomes even harder.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And again, like any assessment, it comes back to the design. Now, yeah, you could put a group of students together and they will not do any work at all unless the activity that we designed for them is meaningful. And the way that one of the things that I often talk to people about it, if something can be done by one person, that one person will do it. So if it's group work, it has to be meaningful and it has to be challenging enough that it cannot be done by one person. And that's the way it is. I mean, there's no point doing group work if it can be done by one person. So, you know, so it comes back to the actual design of the activity. And once we have designed the activity effectively, then we can bring the tools to then monitor that effectively as well.
Yeah, it is a challenge because it is a real world task that people need to be able to demonstrate.
That's right. If I could just very quickly bring in a question, I couldn't see anybody answering this question. It was coming up in the chat, and I can't remember who asked this question. And it's something to do with the reliability of alternative assessments, say compared to traditional exams that we used to have when we move online. How reliable are they, or are they just as reliable? Does anybody on the panel wants to address that? Lene possibly, or Simon, James?
I'm going to let James have a go at that one, I think.
Thank you.
Oh, no, well, one of the good things that you can delegate, I find.
I think because we don't invigilate the exams in the unit that I do, the assignments in my unit. So there's always that possibility that someone else may have done them, provided a higher level of assistance with them than we would like. But I guess what we also find, being a science unit, and it tends to be a bit more, I guess the knowledge that students are developing, the skills they're developing are not necessarily skills and knowledge that everyday people have. So you tend to identify those quite easily, and they're the ones that end up failing because they can't actually do what we've asked them to do. And that's one of the main reasons why students fail our assignments, is they just haven't done the work beforehand. And so, yes, having that conversation with the students then is a chance to pick that up during our resubmission process. Yeah, it's a tough one.
It is a challenge. Look, like, you know, the old argument, I'll be controversial, is, you know, locking someone up in a sports centre for three hours regurgitating kind of content is very, let's say, academically, has high academic integrity kind of values. You know that student has produced that, but has it got any alignment to real world learning outcomes? You know, does that happen to us all? Do we get locked in rooms, you know, with invigilators and told to write something very quickly? Yeah, we're all under time pressure. Whereas when you do more authentic kind of group work, that's how we work in the real world. We collaborate, we discuss, etc. That's much harder to assess, that kind of contribution. It goes back to that kind of group work thing, but it's much more authentic. That is the challenge that we have to try and move towards, you know. I think
yes, and just I'll throw in another layer of complexity there for us, you know, in enabling education. We can often have very high dropout rates. So you can form a group, and I can have a group of 5 students, and a week later, there's only one of them left. So you're constantly trying to reform groups, which again, I guess is authentic for the real world. That happens. You move in and out of groups all the time. And partway through projects, that happens too. So how do we support students with that? Just to make things more difficult.
I think there's an interesting dimension to that as well, which is around the digital literacy skills of students as well. So the more you ask them to do online, the more we need to make sure that it's accessible for them as well, because you can't have a particular, you know, piece of material that, you know, if a student needs a screen reader to read, for example, and it's not accessible, then that puts them at a disadvantage.
Yeah. Well, Prana,
can I just say something on group work a moment, please?
Sure, Ross.
Has anybody considered perhaps it's the way that the group work is formed? If, as a teacher, if I wanted the students to do group work and I thought there may be something, an issue with having all the students work together, if I was to section it out, every person had a piece of jigsaw, but it had to join together. So, but I can assess each person in the group by what I have asked them to do successfully. Whether it fits or whether it doesn't, that's them as a group. But they have actually contributed to that group by fulfilling their piece of the jigsaw.
Well, We're virtually out of time, Pranit. So it's time for a wrap and a summary and where people can find information and resources.
That's right. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I'd just like to thank everyone who joined in for this discussion from all around Australia, but many other parts of the world as well. So thank you very much for that. But more importantly, I'd like to thank our students who have taken the time to come and share their own experiences with them. Ros, Janice, Tak, and Leanne, thank you very much for that. We really, really appreciate your commitment. But also Lene and James, who came in and with rather broad shoulders to share what they have done in their own institutions, which is really, really good. So again, we appreciate that as well. One of the things, there's a couple of things that was coming through very, very loud and clear, I think, from a number of presentations, and that was about how we design assessments and the flexibility that we give our students when they are undertaking these assessments, but also making sure that the assessments that they are doing reflects what they would be expected to do in the real world as well. So I think those are a couple of key points that came up when I was listening to everybody. Simon, did you want to add anything else at this stage?
No, I think that's a pretty good summary, but we will answer any outstanding questions. Resources will go up and we'll share as much as we possibly can, including a copy of this recording.
Yes, that's right. And if you do want to join the National Association of Enabling Educators of Australia, please search us on Google, as well as search HERT's Assessment Quality Special Interest Group. And Simon and I would be more than happy to have a chat to you about that. And that probably concludes our session. Thank you again. And we'll see you maybe next month for a different webinar. Thank you.
Bye-bye.